So this one is about jazz. And it takes place right here. And this is the People's Republic of Harlem, if you didn't know that. Founded in 1904 by a group of people from St. Philip's Episcopal Church, moved up to 65th Street, moved from 65th Street to 135th Street, and bought 5 houses that came to be called Little Africa, and those were the first African Americans in Harlem, and the rest came during the 20s and 30s, so-called migration, the black exodus from the South. And with this exodus from the South came the music of the South, blues and jazz. And from 66th Street, where Lincoln Center is now, there was an Afro-American neighborhood called San Juan Hill. There was some music that was brought up from there. And from Jamaica and Barbados came the Caribbeans, and they brought their music. And Harlem became the melting pot that led to it becoming a renaissance during this era of Prohibition. So this story takes place after the Harlem Renaissance, and then takes place in the second Renaissance of the 60s. And it's called The Fourth Tale Told by an Idiot. Now I told my kids that this tale, some of these stories are coming from a nightingale, a bird, told me different stories. Another one was coming from an idiot. And of course this idiot, for me, was Shakespeare. But he was Shakespeare's ghostwriter, and I called him Sheikh Sabir. Sheikh Sabir was a prototype of a Moor, Othello, that Shakespeare admired the Moors of Spain. These were Africans who ruled Spain for 800 years, from the year 711 AD, when Tariq al-Jabbar came to Spain from Morocco, until 1492, when Caliph Abdullah surrendered to King Ferdinand and Isabella. So the tale was told by an idiot that was a fictional character of Shakespeare. This story is called All That Jazz versus Shabazz, the Bean Pie Palace. Once upon a time, in the People's Republic of Harlem, there was a black tie restaurant on the corner of 135th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. It was called the Grand Shabazz Bean Pie Palace. Now, how many of you ever had a bean pie? Anybody here ever had a bean pie? Okay, this is an invention by a chef whose name was Lana Shabazz, who was the cook for Muhammad Ali. She invented a pie made out of beans. It tastes like sweet potato, but a little bit better. It's run by a master chef economics named Chef Raymond. Now, Chef Raymond was a genius of new recipes, and he invented meals that could almost make you full just by smelling it. Of course, he had his regular menu, which boasted to be the best in the Big Apple. On Saturday nights, Raymond ran a $35 special, all the food you can eat, plus an evening of great Harlem jazz. Now, most people cannot eat much more than 20 forkfuls of the food, because the delicious smell of the food was so filling. Many ended up taking home the bean pie dessert. One day, an old sharp jazz hipster named Snaz, who suffered from acute reverse asthmasia, got hooked on the smell of Raymond's food. Acute reverse asthmasia meant that he could just smell food or stand at a restaurant and get full from just a few whiffs of the soulful cooking aroma coming from Raymond's kitchen. For most people, this was some state of fullness from smelling good food, because asthmasia, connection of the olfactory bulb in the nose to the ventromedial nucleus in the hypothalamus of the brain. Well, that means that you get a feeling of satisfaction from smelling food, and you can become full. This ancient connection linking nose, mouth, and brain tells a person he's getting full and should stop eating. People who lose this connection have acute asthmasia and often gain a lot of weight because they can't tell themselves through smell that they are full or satisfied. So they overeat and overeat and overeat. Now Snaz, also known as All That Jazz, of course was just the opposite. So every Saturday night, Snaz put on his best black tuxedo and red bow tie and stood in front of the Shabazz Bean Pie Palace door. He smelled the food and listened to the great jazz that could be heard just outside the Bean Pie Palace. He also gave a lecture about some tidbit of jazz or blues to all the guests who would listen. For example, did you know, he asked, that the Mississippi field hollers, which were the precursors for the blues, came from the prayer calls of the Wolof people of Africa, who were deposited in Mississippi over 160 years ago? He would ask. People would tip old Snaz when he shared his rare knowledge of the music. And Snaz would use the money to buy 2 chickens, a 5-pound bag of rice, and dry beans, and dog food for his dog, Faithful. Snaz was trying to make it week to week from Saturday to Saturday. He even asked Raymond to be a job tour guide for the jazz people that came there, or to be an MC. Raymond spectacularly refused and kept firmly asking that Snaz move away from the door or come inside and pay for the meal and the event. Snaz refused and became so much part of the Saturday scene that people began to look for him. When Snaz first started coming around the front of the Grand Bean Pie Palace, he was a whopping 400 pounds. After 26 weeks, he had reduced to merely 220 pounds. That's how good his sense of smell was. Raymond got mad one day. He took Snaz to court and charged him with theft of service. That's the food of the music charge. Unjust enrichment, failure to pay for the de facto weight loss that he had lost. Theft of intellectual property. That means listening to original jazz without paying for it. 4th, obstruction of means of ingress and egress. That means blocking the door to the damn restaurant. Tortious interference with the contract between the business and the public. Charge number 6, diversion of corporate opportunity. That means making money from the Bean Pie Palace customers without paying the Bean Pie Palace. The judge, Raymond Rathbone Foothart, was so mad that he threw the book at Snaz. But the book was too heavy and the judge was too weak. So he gave Snaz 30 days to make restitution by paying for the music that he had heard outside the restaurant and smelling the food that he didn't eat, but smelled outside the restaurant, and for interference with Bean Pie Palace's customers. With judgment in favor of the plaintiff, Shabazz, and being found guilty of theft of service, Snaz had to pay $400 in US currency within 30 days or spend 40 days in jail. Snaz thought that this was unjust because he thought that he was rendering a service to the jazz community, to the jazz listening public, by giving information to the customers. But being a hustler, Jazz somehow borrowed money from Jimmy, a childhood friend. He next changed $100 into quarters, or 400 quarters, and he placed them in a black burlap bag, along with 3 $100 bills. But after he put the money in the bag, Snaz bought some bean pie flavored body oil from Malcolm Shabazz Harlem Market, which is right down the street here. And it was a fragrance called Here Is My Heart, and sprinkled it liberally on the money. He called Raymond outside the restaurant. Raymond, I want to pay you, he said. Raymond, I want to pay you. When Raymond came outside the restaurant, he took that burlap bag and shook the 400 quarters and the 3 $100 bills in Raymond's ear, shaking the sound like the playing of an African percussion instrument called a shekere. What the hell are you doing? Screamed Raymond. Are you crazy? I'm paying you, Snaz replied. Do you want to see and smell the money? Snaz continued, opening the bag and invited Raymond to put his nose in the bag. Raymond instinctively placed his nose near the mouth of the bag. Raymond got so mad at his own reaction, he chased Snaz all the way to the 28th precinct on 123rd Street and Frederick Douglass Boulevard. The parties all landed back in court, as Snaz represented his own defense. Your Honor, may it please the court, this is my argument. I heard music outside the restaurant, and so the owner heard the money outside the restaurant. The money that I had in the bag, I shook it in his ear, so he heard the money. This is equal, since I heard the music. I heard the music, he heard the money. Your Honor, I smelled the food outside the restaurant, but I didn't eat anything. So I offered the complainant the opportunity to smell the money outside the restaurant, and he did. If he smelled the money inside the restaurant, he would be unjustly enriched and owe me money, because I never got that close to his food. Judge Foothart finally got so mad at Snaz that he picked up the book to throw at Snaz, but dropped it on his own foot instead. This caused the judge to put his foot in his mouth to soothe the shooting pain in his big toe. The judge unfortunately choked on his own foot after catching a contorting Charlie horse. Well, kids, today there's still a court named after this judge in the People's Republic of Harlem at 178 East 123rd Street, New York, 10031. The old timers call it Judge Foothart's Folly, or the Harlem Foothart Justice Center. It's well known for handling small claims and crazy cases. Snaz ended up doing 40 days and 40 nights at Randall's Island for his inability to pay Shabazz the fine, the damages and the fine. However, while working in the kitchen as a cook, he became very popular for a dish he invented called Nubian fried chicken, NFC. The secret was the dipping sauce, which he called goober sauce, goober secret, a peanut punch under the sauce with a sweet kiss of jalapenos and jerk sauce. There was one English prisoner, rather wealthy, who was in jail that night because he could not be identified. The judge thought him, therefore, to be a flight risk and did not set bail after he was arrested at the scene of an auto accident. He was fascinated by Snaz and loved that goober chicken, that Nubian fried chicken. He promised to help Snaz open his own restaurant when they both got out of jail. He claimed that he was William Shakespeare, a writer and descendant of William Shakespeare. Well, he said Shakespeare's biological father was a Moorish man passing for British whose name was Othello. Therefore, Shakespeare was writing a play about his father. All that William Shakespeare wanted to do was to move the People's Republic of Harlem to the People's Republic of Harlem, live a quiet life, and finish his play. In the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king. That was the name of his play. It turned out that William Shakespeare was rich. He received money from a blind trust set up by William Shakespeare at the William Shakespeare East Indies Company, 1614, all West Indian residents, descendants. Well, it was Shakespeare's money. Snaz opened up a famous restaurant across the street from the Bean Pie Palace. And he sold his Google's chicken. And his Meet Me in Harlem showcase produced long lines of patrons who wrapped around the corner of 135th Street like a warm scarf wraps around the neck in winter. Well, so much for free enterprise. That situation put the Grand Shabazz Bean Pie Palace out of business. Raymond went bankrupt and became homeless. Soon he was hanging out in front of Goobler Chicken Palace, the restaurant that had put him out of business. Holding the door for patrons of the restaurant and the jazz shows, he was collecting tips in a black burlap bag. Snaz, who kept his own identity undercover, sent out his manager to offer Raymond a job. Raymond refused help out of abundance of pride. The second time he refused out of an abundance of hopelessness. The third time he accepted out of the abundance of fear. Shabazz went on to eventually become a baking contractor for Snaz, producing Shabazz bean pie, honey carrot raisin pie, Irish Dublin custard pie, royal Persian peach pie, and other pies for restaurant chains. Shabazz never learned the identity of his benefactor, Snaz, the old man that had once sat by the door as a beggar. Snaz had a lot of class, and he never revealed his true name. Never limit a man to small real estate of his own hustle. As long as he has inner integrity, he will win a bigger dream. Greed, like the Cyclops, is indeed a one-eyed monster. Ignorance is a beggar blind in both eyes. Kindness opens the heart. The life of the rose will overcome winter and bloom again. Bloom it must, even among bitter shards of the shattered glass of lives who haunt the sidewalks of the People's Republic of Harlem. William Shakespeare finally finished his book. Harlem became green, and there was dancing in the streets and in the cafes on Frederick Douglass Boulevard. Tales were told by idiots, full of sound and fury, to the abundance of a Harlem smiles. That's the story.
Yeah, love it, Monet.
It's a bedtime story.